I didn't actually ask how you feel when you start getting these acceptance letters. So instead of your like week of mourning, instead, did you post on Instagram?
I did. I did. I updated my bio. I didn't post on Instagram, but I updated my Instagram bio just so people knew kind
Okay.
of where I'd gotten in.
I'm Hank Green, and here at Study Hall, we want to know how people learn and how different people's college experiences affected their lives and careers. We're talking to different people about that, and today I'm talking to YouTuber, educator, MIT grad, and all around awesome guy, Gohar Khan. We're talking about his life, his career, and his college journey. Gohar, welcome. It is a real pleasure to talk to you. It is so interesting to me what you do, how you do it, who you are connecting with, how successful you are, how much demand there is for the work that you're doing. And I wanted to talk to you about your I guess like just a brief like what do you do, who you are, like how do you imagine your role as like the newly minted uncle of all of these high school students.
Yeah. Honestly, first of all, it's an absolute honor just to be sitting here like talking with you
Oh,
because I
thanks.
vividly remember just crash course carrying me through my high school years and to be having this conversation today, just super excited. Like the way that I see myself, it's really hard to explain, I guess, what I do and what maybe we do, because I think
Yeah.
to like the conversations I have with relatives and to say, I'm a YouTuber, I think it leaves them a little confused at first. But then when you explain what you've built and what you're talking about, it starts to make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
The way that I go about it is I just say I'm like an educational content creator, helping students
That's what I
succeed
say.
inside and outside of school. Like that's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. It's funny because like sometimes you have to explain. Recently I was at the dentist and I for the first time in my life there's like a little line that says like what's your occupation? Because I guess they need to know that for some reason. And I just gave up and I was like YouTuber. Like
Mhm.
for so long, I tried to like create some kind of other thing that I was, but I'm like, look, it's 2025. You
Yeah.
like people are YouTubers. That's a job people have now. In
No, it's a
2000,
job they haven't. It's a job they like want. I feel like young kids
yeah,
nowadays want to be a YouTuber more than anything.
yeah. So so I when I look at what you do, a fair bit of it is figuring out what students need and trying to provide that for them. And a fair bit of it, and this is true for me as well, is figuring out how to actually package that in a way that people are going to click on it and that it's going to get picked up and it's going to reach more people. Is that accurate in terms of like more nuts and bolts of what you do?
100%. I would say the main challenge now is taking really, not want to say abstract concepts, but just drier concepts, whether it's
Yeah.
how taxes work, the difference between a savings account and a checking account,
Hmm.
different study methods, and weaving it into like 30-second bite-sized shorts that are engaging yet also educational. And so
Yeah.
there's like this constant trade-off between, how much value I can give, but then how entertaining I can also make it in like as short of a time as possible.
Yeah. Right? Because like both of those things take time, but you don't have time anymore. But you also, make long form stuff as well. And it's really nice to be able to have that balance. I know as well as a person who does both of those things. So what are you working on right now? Is there anything that I might not know about that I should know about?
So ultimately, the main focus for me has been my long form content. So I
Yeah.
think for the longest time, I've just been more like a teacher in my long form content where I'm sitting in front of a desk, kind of like I am right now, and just going over a lesson.
Hmm.
But over the next month or so, we're going to be doing, or over the next few months, we're going to be doing a series of pretty fun videos. So, for example, one video is going to be like, do video games make you smarter? It's going to be like a little mini doc of me just playing different games
Mm-hmm.
and kind of investigating that topic. Another video we're planning to do is I visited the Harvard of China, where I go to Tsinghua University and sort of walk around and
Mm,
investigate like the campus environment. Uh, and
that's
all of
cool.
this just coincides with like this studio investment that I made recently. So I think just going deeper on long form, like, more fun long form, more entertaining long form, that's really the goal.
Yeah, nice. And they can find you by searching for Gohar Khan on
Yep.
YouTube. So, I want to talk a little bit about how, like, what education was like and how you got started, so I can understand how you got how you are here. But what was I have some guesses, but what was the vibe around education when you were growing up?
Going to college was a given. I think
Sure.
growing up here, my parents I wouldn't say they forced it upon me, but it was almost just like it was just understood that college was
Yeah.
the path and it was the route to take after high school.
Hmm.
My parents themselves didn't go to college. They came here from Pakistan in the 80s and 90s. And so they just knew that's kind of the route that you take to eventually get a job and, secure a high paying salary. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of the mindset I had from day one.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you were even like in, like elementary, middle, high school, how did you see school? Like, was it a thing that you had to do, or was it a thing that you felt like you were like lucky to get to do, or is it just like this is the structure of the universe and I am inside of it?
No, I think when I was in elementary school, I was drawn to learning naturally. Like I was a huge nerd from as long as I can remember. I
Mm.
remember in like first, second grade having like the nickname Einstein because I would just have this journal and I would just write down and study like the most random concepts that I can find online. Whether it was like chemistry or like history or Genghis Khan or buckyballs,
Yeah.
it was just a bunch of random stuff. Um,
Nice.
Loved learning all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, is that really just a thing? Like, have you always had just like a genuine curiosity? It isn't about necessarily a goal. Or is there an element of, as I see this in myself and in my son, of like sort of grasping onto an identity and being like I could be the smart kid, and that'll be like a valuable thing that people will not necessarily like be friends with you about, but like at least like have an identity that has some status tied to it.
I think that maybe came more as I got older. When I
Okay.
think back to like, that youthful innocence when I'm like in first,
Uh-huh.
second, third grade, like that's just pure curiosity. Like I'm playing with
Yeah.
dirt, just trying to learn random stuff. But I think when the world sort of pigeonholes you into a certain box or category, there
Hmm.
definitely comes this pressure to uphold that. And I think I started feeling that more as I got into middle school because that's when I learned about like class rank for the first time. And I
Oh, you had
remember
class
being,
rank in middle school?
yeah, which was like really
Oh my
surprising. But I
God.
remember being like super pressured and anxious almost. I was like, I need to do
Hmm.
everything I can to,
Yeah.
be close to number one or be somewhere up there.
Oh my God. You had class rank in, man, I did not have class rank in any school I ever went to. As far as I
Really?
know, maybe we did. I just did not pay any attention to it. I mean, we had a valedictorian, so I guess somebody had to be number one. But in high school, but I probably was far enough down the list that it did not enter into my brain. Back to you. Did you have like dreams of what you so I was dreaming about being maybe a science communicator. Did you have dreams of what you might do?
Yes, my dream for the longest time was becoming a Minecraft YouTuber. When I was in like elementary school, middle school,
I'm
uh,
I'm so old. Oh my God.
no, it's incredible. Like becoming a YouTuber was definitely my dream
Yeah.
from day one.
Wow.
Uh, I remember
Yeah.
in elementary school for the first few years, I was like, what is YouTube? It always felt like one of those bad websites that you weren't allowed to visit. And
Yep.
then in fifth grade, ventured on. And at the time, I was playing a bunch of like random online games, like whether it was like Cool Math or Club Penguin or Pop Tropica. And so
Sure.
I would go on YouTube and, look up like walkthroughs and sheets and guides. And in the process, I came across like certain YouTubers that I just started looking up to. I was like, oh my God, these guys are so cool. They're so popular on these games. Uh,
Hmm.
it would be so fun if I just started making my own walkthroughs and guides on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yep.
And so that was like my initial dream. And I kind of like took it on and started uploading videos in elementary school. And I'm glad that sort of through line has continued like to this very day.
That's wild. Of course you wanted to be a YouTuber. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
These days. And in the sort of way of many dreams, the really there's something under the dream. And so like being a Minecraft YouTuber, I don't imagine that now you dream of being do you ever have moments where you're like, maybe I could waylay this success in education YouTubing to being a Minecraft YouTuber? Do
I don't think that thought has ever crossed my mind, but
exactly, right? Because yeah. But
I will say on my channel, I have live streamed myself playing Minecraft. So I
okay.
have gotten
You got to
it's
do
kind of been like
it.
a full circle moment, but we're not there. So
Okay, yeah. I want to talk about, it sounds like you were a big, smart kid. Like, what, can you give us some examples of like a young, like fifth grade Gohar being a big nerd?
yes, I think being a big nerd and then also just I don't want to say like overly ambitious, but just I think fifth
Mm,
grade Gohar didn't feel like there were limits to his ability in this world. So just
Yeah.
to give you like two examples, uh, in fifth grade, I attempted a world record. I remember I was reading the Guinness Book of World Records, and there was like this record for like patting your head and like rubbing your like
Uh-huh.
stomach. The
You're like,
record was like
I could do
150.
that.
Yeah, it was like 200 people. And I remember the second I read that, I was like, oh my God, like we need to beat this. Like there are 600 people in the school. And I remember going up to my principal at the end of the day, and we figured it out. Like we arranged like a
That's
whole
awesome.
thing. Uh, and I just look back to that younger Gohar, and I'm like, what was going through your head when you were just like
Yeah.
trying out all these random things? And maybe one more example is I was really interested in just videography and like cinematography. And so I was like hell bent on making a movie. And so I would get like all my friends together. I was like, guys, I'm writing a script. Here are the scenes. Here's how you're going to act. Ended up getting like my entire class involved for some reason. That was like a really fun project to work on as well. And I
That's
think that's
awesome.
sort of just ambition, I guess, has carried over,
Yeah.
fortunately.
That's just like agency in the world. And I think a lot of people, don't doesn't like hit to have that. And yeah, seeing the world as a structure that can actually be manipulated, I think is really important. So was there a lot of pressure on you? It sounds like this was pretty self-motivated, but it seems also like your parents wanted a pretty specific set of outcomes for you. Did you feel pressure?
The only pressure that I felt was sometimes becoming a doctor growing up. It wasn't like an
Yeah.
overt pressure from my mom, but she would often say, I would love it if you could go into the medical field. And
Yeah.
so through like later middle school, early high school, that's something I was definitely nudged towards. But I think a lot of the pressure was just intrinsic in terms of being able to do what I love and truthfully, just getting into the best schools I could. That sort of
Mm.
started clicking when I was in like eighth, ninth grade. And I kind of learned what the Ivy League was for the first time. And I was like, holy crap, these schools seem really cool.
You're thinking about your class rank, and then you're like, wait a second, there's like special schools that are the best ones.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I remember like that blowing my mind. And then as soon as I heard about like these schools for the first time, I was like, oh my God, I got to do whatever I can to get in.
This is gonna blow your mind. I did not know what the Ivy League was until after I graduated from college.
Wait, college? Not high school?
Yeah,
I thought you were about to say
college.
you started that sentence and I thought you were about to say high school.
Yeah,
And
no,
then you said college.
yeah, no, I said I was gonna blow your mind.
That did blow my mind.
It didn't enter into my brain. Like I knew that like Harvard was a very good school that I wasn't going to apply to. Like it was not in the realm of possibility. Like I got into all the schools I applied to, of which there were three. And
Three.
yeah, because I'd like, I didn't apply to any schools that I didn't think I wasn't going to get into.
Was that the norm amongst you and your peers, or was
No.
okay?
No, I was just like I'm going to college and I knew I was going to college and I knew that the schools I was applying to were likely to accept me. And so I didn't feel like I needed to do more work.
I think that's the mindset people today need to have. And it's the mindset I wish I honestly had because I think in the social media era where like now, like as soon as you get into college, the first thing you do is post it to Instagram, like
Ugh,
update your
ugh.
Instagram
Oh
bio,
my
announce
God.
it to the world. And I
I
think it's created this undue like expectation amongst so many young people to like
I
just get
mean,
into the best.
yeah, I mean this will also I remember when we took our pre-SATs, our sort of like test before the test, and all of the kids in my class were like talking about and I was like in a like this was like the advanced English class. We're talking about the scores they got, and my teacher was like, "Everybody, can you stop bragging about your scores? Because there are some people being quiet right now who did not get the good score." And I was that kid. Where and so like, I ended up doing fine on my SATs, but like I had to do work.
Honestly, same here. I feel like there are some students who go into the SAT and they just somehow nail it their first time. And I think
Yeah.
what a lot of people think maybe the experience that I had, but truthfully, no, I had to study. I took these exams like multiple times, like two, three times total, ended up taking
Mm.
the ACT, and went
And
through like a bunch of prep materials.
did you feel a lot of pressure around getting into the Ivy League?
As soon as I entered high school, yes, I think
Okay.
a lot of it was just internal, regardless of whether or not who knew or who was telling me that these are the schools I should aim for. But then as I progressed through high school, I slowly started talking more about it with friends and uh, teachers. And then it sort of just became this expectation amongst my peers as well that, oh, Gohar's going to apply to these schools and he's
Mm.
going to try to get in. And so not letting them down became like a big
Oh,
goal.
interesting. So you put this on yourself.
100% fully. Yeah.
Okay. I always imagine it being external. That's so interesting. And I'm sure that it often isn't, you know. But just like that's my stereotype of the kids who end up going to the Ivy Leagues is that like their whole world is like telling them that they have to figure out how to do this. What did that orientation like affect how you did high school?
It did. So I think it gave me a bit of breathing room in terms of, like, for example, the extracurriculars that I was doing. I think, when I think to my friends who maybe whose parents were pressuring them, they kind of
Hmm.
pigeonhole them into whether it's music or arts or sports, like these very like cookie cutter extracurriculars that they know, I guess, like,
Hmm.
somewhat know are going to get them into these top schools.
Yeah.
But for me, it was, yes, I had that internal pressure, but because I sort of knew that uh, I could do whatever I wanted, I
Hmm.
I was doing web dev and like YouTube and a bunch of like these outside extracurriculars on my own during that
Yeah.
time because
Yeah.
nobody was telling me to do the more traditional stuff, which was
Yeah.
nice.
Were you able to like have a social life in that world?
In my early years, honestly, like ninth grade, no. I remember like I had a close group of friends. Like, my best friends from like middle school. I was super close with them through all of high school. But
Hmm.
I remember ninth grade being that year, just I was obsessed over every single grade that I got, over
Mm.
every single point of my resume.
Hmm.
And so, like, as soon as I would end school, I would just go home and just do my own work on my own activities to build that up. But I think as I kind of eased along high school, I definitely started hanging out more and, having somewhat of a better balance.
So what was the big draw of like Ivy League for you?
So I think I knew like the academic component was, of course, there. Whether it was, studying amongst the best professors or like renowned professors, having access to just like an array of resources.
Hmm.
Uh, but more honestly and deeper down, I think there was an element of just like status and just
Yeah.
wanting to go to an Ivy League. I think that played a lot into my psyche. Uh,
Hmm.
Again, in this like social media age.
So you said your parents thought that this like college was just a standard path. Is that something that you sort of just accepted?
Yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
also, it was what my peers were doing, my cousins
Yeah.
from back home. You know.
Hmm. So your mom, it makes sense to me that a mom is like, okay, we're new in this country, and like a doctor is like a very high status job where you're helping people and like it's got like a great combination of income, makes perfect sense. And you're like, I really like YouTube. Well, did you feel tension there? Do you feel tension there even now?
I, yes, I remember in my early years, my mom sort of calling YouTube a hobby. But I
Hmm.
remember that would always like irritate me a little bit. Like I felt like YouTube was more of it was like I wouldn't say a calling, but it was like my deep passion. And to kind of call it a hobby and to kind of treat it as something more to the side, um, it didn't feel right because it's what I put all of my attention to. And I think ultimately what they were just worried about was security and stability and
Yeah.
sort of the monetary aspect of it,
Yeah.
which to a lot of people, it sounds really weird when you say ads play on videos and you make money off of ads.
Yeah.
Um, but then I think when I got into college and it kind of came full circle when I started doing social media again, this time my parents were more comfortable. One, because I had done it when I was younger. And two, this time around, they were seeing like the income component that was
Sure.
attached to it. And so it felt more
Yeah.
like a legitimate job and less like a hobby.
So you are doing well in high school. You know you're gonna apply to a bunch of fancy schools. Let's talk about who you decide to apply with, because I know I have the I can see the future of this story, and you don't end up going to an Ivy League school, but you
No.
do end up going to a very good school. How did you decide what schools to apply to? Like when you're applying at this level, there's never a guarantee you're gonna get in anywhere. I mean, maybe some people, maybe if you've like won some kind of Nobel Peace Prize, or like, there are some people who are gonna get in wherever they apply, but like, there's never a guarantee.
100%. Even then, it's incredible. You'll see the profile of applicants, like people
Yeah.
online talking about, I won the IMO. I had a gold medal for my country. I was like the best math student from, so and so. and they're not getting into these schools. It genuinely is a crapshoot for
Yeah.
everyone involved. Like it doesn't matter your status, who you are.
Yeah.
And so like the approach that I took, which honestly I don't recommend all students take. Uh, of course, I did like the standard three buckets, right? I had my safeties, matches, and reaches. So I had like a couple schools.
And I had my three buckets. I had one school in each.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so for me, it was like maybe one or two schools in my safeties, like two schools in my matches, and then my reaches were just like the entire Ivy League, MIT, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, all
Hmm.
these schools that, uh, I thought would be great for me, not only academically, but also financially, because these were the schools that had like the best need-based data in the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was like another draw. Um,
Hmm.
and so I spent weeks and weeks and months of my senior year just preparing all these materials and essays and doing the nonstop interviews as well.
Dude, there's interviews.
Yes.
They come and talk to you. This is not something they did at my school or maybe in my era.
Yeah, like alumni interviews for all the Ivy League schools that I applied to. I had to meet up with like a local alumni
Wow.
over a coffee and just sort of chat about my dreams and ambitions and
Wow.
what I
Holy
wanted to
crap.
study and why that school. It's luckily it's not that intimidating though. It's less about
That
academics and
sounds
more
actually
just
really
about
nice. Yeah.
yeah, no, exactly. And it's a chance for you to also learn about the school and ask them about like their experience.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Were the people you talked to like mostly not that far from your age, or were they like
They were fully
40,
adult. Like
45, 65-year-old people?
no, it ran the gamut. I would say maybe on the lower end, like 30 to 35.
Yeah.
But then I remember also interviewing with this one man who was, I think, like 60, 65 years old.
Once you're getting that kind of like is that can't be like the first round of applicants getting those interviews.
See, it's
Can't
really weird. What these schools say is that they try to interview everyone they can just based on alumni availability. So
Gotcha.
they never say that there's like a screening process. They just give everyone interviews.
Interesting. Now we're in like the area of stuff you know a lot about.
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you have reacted if you didn't get into any of your reach schools?
I think I probably would not talk to anyone for like an entire week or two.
Okay.
Like
Totally get it. It's a big deal.
I probably would have been devastated to be totally honest. Um, but I think I was like rational and logical enough to understand that these schools weren't the end all be all of my like
Sure.
life's trajectory. And so I definitely think I would have been totally fine, say maybe like a week later.
Okay. Still,
Hopefully.
that's still a big hit. A week is a long time. That's like a real breakup. That's not the hurt from a breakup after, 2 weeks of dating. That's the hurt of breakup after like 2 years of dating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe a week's ambitious. I would say, I would start maybe talking to people again. I would show my face in the world again after a week, but of course, I would still carry that sort of weight with me.
Yeah, yeah. This is the thing. Like it's so like caring that much about this thing that you can't control, but you also can control, and so it does feel like it's on you. It does feel like it's so much easier to go my path and be like, oh, I'm just gonna apply to three schools that are all gonna take me. Do you think how big of a part do you think like your upset or frustration at not getting into these reach schools would have been tied to knowing that money was gonna be harder? Because a lot of these schools are the ones with the best needs-based aid.
That would have played a huge factor in
Okay.
sort of how I
Hmm.
would feel and how my family would feel.
Yeah.
Uh, I think the cost of college is something my parents were sort of bracing themselves for as I was growing up. Like they just sort of knew that it was going to cost
Hmm.
a ton of money and that loans would be involved. And transparently, like neither they nor I knew about these financial aid programs until I got to high school.
Hmm.
And only until I discovered them did we really see like a viable path to free college.
Mm.
And of course, there are like a bunch of other ways to also get free college, but for us, this was like a pairing of you get like the name brand, you get these amazing
Yeah.
academics, and you get to go for free. It felt like the ultimate sort of package for like our entire family.
Yeah. So were you thinking in the application process about various ways to get, both aid and also prepping for some loan stuff, maybe?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I think we didn't really start preparing for like student loans or doing heavy research on that end until
Okay.
I started getting some of my like initial decisions back.
Uh-huh.
but that's something that we were definitely prepared to kind of go
Yeah.
the route of. And also like external scholarships too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, where'd you get in and how did you make your choice?
After applying to like all these different schools, I ended up getting into it was like six Ivies, Stanford,
Wow.
MIT,
Wow. Wait, I stepped on you. What were the other two?
Stanford and MIT,
Oh my God.
uh,
Oh, Jesus.
and then like most of my like matches and safeties as well. So it
Which of your safeties said no? Just put them on blast.
Oh no, they didn't say no. I only applied to UConn and then I got into UConn, so
Okay.
that was all good.
Okay.
But it was like
Wow.
such a surreal
Yeah,
experience
now
because
you gotta make a choice.
yeah, and transparently, a lot of it was pretty easy. Like the
Okay.
decision ultimately came down to so amongst the Ivy League schools, the one that I was most drawn to was Yale. And then I was also drawn to Stanford and MIT just because I knew I wanted to study computer science.
Sure.
And so the choice came down to those three schools. And the first factor was distance. I would have loved to go to Stanford or would have loved to have gone there, but my parents just didn't want to send me off to the West Coast. They wanted to be close enough to me. So
Sure.
that quickly took Stanford out of the mix. And then it just
Hmm.
came down to MIT and Yale. And because I wanted to study computer science, MIT just felt more like the
Sure.
intuitive choice in that case.
That makes sense. God, congratulations. Jesus. That must you could just coast on that for your whole life. So you applied to a lot of schools then. How did you do that? Because obviously I didn't.
I guess one question for you is when you were applying to schools, did you have the Common App or a similar
No,
system?
no, that
Okay.
didn't exist.
So I think that that's a big part. Just having the Common App and being able to just resubmit pretty much the same application amongst every single school, irrespective of just like the supplemental essays. That was like the one component that I had to write over and over again. But
Hmm.
that made it easier. Also, just being able to be really strategic about the essays. I think many students think about their essays at the last minute, but what I ended up doing is I looked at all of the essay prompts before I even started applying, and I created groups based on like prompt similarity. And so I would just tackle groups together. I would write
Mm.
like the longest essay for each essay group, and then trim that down for the other supplements in that category. And so
Jeez.
kind of let me like
That's smart.
optimize, I guess, the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, that's super smart. I mean, that you could write a college essay on your college essay strategy. Be very impressive. Did you have to pay? Did this cost money?
So each application did cost money, but luckily I had a fee waiver, so I was able to
Okay.
apply to all these schools uh, for free.
What resources did you use to try and figure out aid? I mean, I guess probably it's a little bit abstract until you find out where you're going. And then once you figure out where you're going, probably. Is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, and I think just largely in terms of resources, whether it was for aid or just the admissions process in general,
Hmm.
Reddit, and there was like this one
Mm.
forum called College Confidential, which is where like every single admissions tryhard was, whether it was like students, parents, counselors.
Now they're in your comments. That's
Yeah, no, exactly. A nicer version of them, fortunately. But the
yeah.
people in College Confidential were just ruthless. Like they were just super intimidating, but informative. And so that's why I'd
Yeah.
often just go to that website to pick up some tips.
Interesting. So MIT was definitely a bit of a shoe-in because you were looking at computer science, but why were you looking at computer science? Why was that the thing?
I think there's another component to this whole story of wanting to become a YouTuber. So while this was happening during my time in school, I was also really into web development. So
Gotcha.
I was like uploading videos about like these different games, but at the same time, I ran like a network of different blogs about these games. And so I just became obsessed
And
with like web design and web development and even like SEO at like 12, 13 years old, which is really weird.
hmm
But
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of like just introduced me to the world of CS. And like one of the first languages that I learned was PHP. And I thought it was just super fun to just build random web apps with. And so when I got into high school, I was like, this is what I want to keep doing as well.
At this point, that's a direction a lot of people are like not gonna be mad at you for heading in a computer science direction.
Yes, exactly. So my parents were very comfortable when I sort of made that decision.
Yeah. So I didn't actually ask how you feel when you start getting these acceptance letters. So instead of your like week of mourning, instead, Did you post on Instagram?
I did. I did. I updated my bio. I didn't post on Instagram, but I updated my Instagram bio just so people knew kind
Okay.
of where I'd gotten in.
Yeah.
But I remember the acceptances coming in, and I still have the recording. Like the first one, like I'm just jumping up and screaming. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then it's like the second, third, and like the fourth, fifth, and I like
Hmm.
it keeps going. And I remember at
Weird.
a certain point, I'm just like starting to lose my mind. I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is actually happening here? The latter half of senior year was just, I wouldn't say a vacation, but it just felt so much easier because at that point you have these
Yeah.
acceptances.
And
Um,
you didn't have the stress, and you also didn't have all the work of applying to the schools.
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you're just kind of coasting along, waiting for the school year to end. So I remember that part of my high school experience just being like far, far more enjoyable.
So then you go to MIT, and how is your beginning of that? Let's just start with academics.
So brutal, like brutal beyond imagination. Nothing could have prepared me for intro level
Mm.
physics at MIT. It's a course called 801. I had taken honors physics in senior year. Our school didn't have like AP physics. And I just remember being just utterly perplexed, not only by the concepts themselves, but by the way that we were learning. Because high
Mm.
school, as you kind of touched upon earlier, was just so much memorization. Everything was multiple choice. Uh, but at MIT, I didn't take a single multiple choice exam. And like the problem sets that we were doing, everything was open ended and required you to like synthesize multiple topics at once. And just learning to learn in that way
Hmm.
was much harder for me.
Yeah. And is that was it really a process of having to like retrain your brain as to what like a physics problem was?
Yes, retraining my brain and then also learning how to ask for help and like leverage
Oh, interesting.
resources.
Yeah.
Because in high school, the only resources that I had were, I could go to the internet, I can kind of text my friends to see if they have any insights. But I think college was interesting in that you have office hours, you have tutoring centers, you have the people on your dorm floor. It's like, uh, yes, the stuff is harder, but you're also just given the opportunity to figure it out in one of many different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you get comfortable doing that?
I feel like early on, I just found, I'd say some like upperclassmen mentors almost,
Hmm.
who kind of just guided me through like the academic experience. Like they would tell me, start going to office hours because, sure, you can ask for help, but sometimes they just go through the problems entirely. And I was like, oh my God, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Uh, they would also sometimes just help me out, uh, like in our dorm lounge. Like if they were just sitting around relaxing and I was doing a problem set, I could literally just like call one of them over and ask for help. And it just sort of became this sort of like they were like an older brother, but then also my tutor at the same time. And you never
Mm.
have that dynamic in high school.
Yeah, that's cool. Is that something, I don't know, how'd you charm your way into that relationship?
I
Did it
think
feel natural? Did it feel like it was sort of like waiting for you to just find it?
it felt natural, and I think it's because before I actually enrolled or decided to go to MIT, I went to this event called Campus Preview Weekend, and it's when a
Uh-huh.
lot of the admitted students come to campus just to experience the environment. And then MIT pairs you up with like an upperclassman to stay with, and
Mm,
so this
cool.
is someone that I had already known during CPW, and so when I got to MIT, that sort of relationship was already there.
Was that the big way, or are there other resources that were important for figuring that stuff out?
I would say the main other resource that I used all the time was office hours. Just going into those, not only being able to work with other students, but just to ask TAs to explain um,
Gotcha.
like these different problems from start to finish was really helpful.
So you've got suddenly an influx of academics. Things are real hard. I mean, I remember it getting super challenging pretty fast. Though I think in probably different ways. There's usually quite a lot of fun and extracurricular stuff happening in college. Was there space for that for you?
There was, and in my early days, I tried joining and doing as many different activities as I could.
Yeah.
I remember joining like the MIT Research Journal. There was like a hackathon group. There was like a business club that I tried out for. And then the craziest one was me trying out for a dance team. That was just totally outside my comfort zone. Like I never done theater, dance, like anything really physical in high school.
Uh-huh.
But I remember them just they just seemed super welcoming. They're like, oh, it's totally fine if you don't have experience. Just come along, try it out, give it a shot. And I remember going to tryouts and it just being a complete disaster. Like they would go through, like they were like, oh, we'll take this really slowly, and they would do like a couple moves.
Yeah.
And I would follow along for like the first 2 to 3 moves, but then
Yeah.
beyond that, I would just become totally uncoordinated. But at least I tried.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. That's great. I mean, it's always funny when people are like, "Oh, it's super low key, no worries." I remember like going to a ultimate frisbee where I thought like, "Oh, low key, no worries. That means we're gonna be like, a beer in one hand and a frisbee in the other."
yeah,
And then it was like, no, it was not. And there were rules that I did not know. And I was like, I'm never doing this again.
yeah.
Then you were in school. Let me do the math here. 2020, that sounds like an interesting time to be in school. How did the start of the pandemic hit you?
This was the end of my junior year.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was a really, of course, it was just an unfortunate time in general, but it was
Yeah.
particularly unfortunate because junior year is when I started thinking a lot about recruiting. I was thinking about going into consulting or software engineering,
Hmm.
and I knew that for those paths, particularly consulting, I needed like a really high GPA. And so my junior year is when I just enrolled in a bunch of courses at once to kind of boost up my GPA at the last minute.
Mm. Here's how I'm gonna fix this problem. I'm gonna have a higher GPA. I just need a bunch of data points that are all really high. So I'll just take a lot of classes all at once,
Yeah.
and that won't be a problem.
No, exactly. And like that's sort of the mentality that I had. And to be fair, a lot of these were business courses. So I double majored in like CS and business. And so I leaned more into my business side. And I'm like, if I just take a bunch of these, this should
I could just
definitely
get a lot of A's.
yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, like that's kind of the mindset that I just had to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but then with the pandemic, we were all kicked off of campus. I was back home in Connecticut. And so that just threw everything into disarray because at this point, I'm not as conscientious about like my coursework anymore. And there's just a lot of free time. And so I spend a lot of this free time just by posting to social media, just like random stuff out of boredom. It was
Mhm.
like memes, random skits, just everything that came to mind. But then some of these videos hinted at the fact that I went to MIT. So then a lot of the comments were then just, how did you get in? Do you have any advice? Do you have any tips? And I
Mm.
quickly found myself becoming like a college admissions creator during my senior year as I'm starting to like wrap up my time at MIT.
How did you do on all those business classes though?
I did all right. I feel like a lot of them were communications based or a lot of just lots of like presenting and stuff. So that was easy.
Yeah.
But I definitely spent less time focusing on classes, especially as like my social media
Yeah.
started growing. And I was like, this is just a lot more fun and engaging and even challenging at times.
That's the thing. Yeah. It's like the reinforcement is really good. The motivation is really good. It's not easy, but it's motivating. And I think that the platforms design it to be that way. That they design it to make it feel good to work hard to make content that gets views. Because that's how they succeed. How was it frustrating? And also, was it harder to do academics with everything closed down?
It felt harder, but then also like parts of it felt easier, if anything,
Yeah.
because I think in response to the pandemic, a lot of our professors understood that, we just didn't have the time or the mental capacity to be working on like super long P sets. The harder component was just staying motivated and disciplined because there were no like accountability systems. I had no like roommates or people on my dorm floor to wake me up or anything. It was me
Hmm.
getting up early enough to hop on Zoom, for a lecture that I knew was going to be recorded. So a lot of it was just like, why should I even take this right now? Like, why not just watch
Yeah.
this later this evening?
Uh-huh.
Um,
And then will you ever watch it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And a
Yeah.
lot of the times you don't. So
Yeah. Yeah. So your social media thing is happening. When do you decide like, okay, here's a thing that's working. It's not what I was really intending. I was just sort of goofing off online. But like I found a thing that's working and so do you just start chasing off in that direction because it's working?
because it's working and it's also just how I enjoyed spending my time. Uh,
Yeah.
Through college, I had done a few corporate internships, which were
Hmm.
immensely valuable in just terms of like what I learned and just becoming more disciplined in the work field. But when I was working on my own content, just ideating, scripting, editing, like I genuinely felt like I lost track of time. Uh, and I wanted to continue just chasing that feeling of just being in my own creative zone and just building the things that I genuinely felt passionate about.
Hmm.
So that was like the ultimate lure. And then the signs that came along the way were, maybe my first brand deal or my first like AdSense check that sort of reinforced the safety of what I was doing. Um, Enough to the point where I believe that if I went out along this path, I could probably make it work.
That's exciting. And also it doesn't like preclude other potential futures. I think that chasing a passion for a little while is really valuable because it can, even if it's like, well, what were you doing during this period? It's like, oh, this. I was being independent. I was like self-motivated. I was solving problems. I was running my own business, like whatever that is. It's going to look actually not like goofing off to a good employer. It's going to look impressive to them.
Yeah, like it doesn't preclude them. Like if anything, it enables all these like different opportunities that you can take on afterwards.
And you're also building your own tool set. Like that's what education is about. It's about like having more skills and tools that you can apply to more problems. And, it's a very like college is a very concentrated period of time for that, but so is starting a thing from scratch and figuring out how to try to make it work. That's a hugely concentrated time of skill building. And it's all about building ourselves into people who could be capable in the world. What are like, can you give an example of one of these just, you said you were posting skits on social media?
So it was like these weird, like 5 to 10 second just scenarios in school. I think I did one about, I forget what it was exactly, but it was like a teacher and a student. And it's like that moment when your teacher, I don't know, like says something you don't understand. It was just like these random
Sure.
scenarios
Yeah, it's a
from the
TikTok.
class.
You're making a
Yeah, yeah,
TikTok.
exactly. And so
Like, did you have like a moment when you like realized like a lot of people are talking to you about how did you get into MIT? Like that you realized that there was like maybe a problem here that you could help solve?
yes, one of the early videos that I posted was about my college interview experience
Uh-huh.
with Yale. Uh, and I talked about how my Yale experience was particularly unusual in that compared to my other interviews where they were asking more about like my passions and my interests and my hobbies, this one was about like my philosophies, about like religion and just like these
Mm,
very broad topics that, to be honest, I wasn't thinking about. Uh,
yeah.
and so when I told this story, a lot of it just kind of reached this audience of students that were applying to college, hearing about interviews for the first time, and they're like, "Oh my God, what are these college interviews actually like?" Um,
Hmm.
and so then I started responding to a lot of these comments just with more advice about college interviews and how I navigated that process. Uh, Ultimately realizing that a lot of this information about college admissions and elite college admissions in particular, it's not something they were teaching or covering in school or that their guidance counselors were like um,
Yeah.
like helping them through.
Yeah. Or even had much knowledge of. Because, you went through it very recently, and that's really valuable. Um, and also like questions are so inspiring.
Yeah.
The responses to your um to those answers were good enough that you kept wanting to do it somehow. Was that just sort of like a day by day transition and was that happening while you were still in school?
It was happening at the same time. And to your point about questions, I 100% agree. And I think there's a lot of satisfaction in articulating these really opaque parts of the process. Um, because institutions will not give direct answers about who they look for or like why they look
Oh
for
yeah.
certain applicants.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
It's
and-
just like why Google will never say how they actually rank websites.
yeah,
Is immediately people will game it.
exactly. And so just being able to make my own observations about this process after just going through thousands of Reddit posts or just looking at a bunch of profiles, um, and being able to like relay that to these students and provide some clarity
Hmm.
feels incredible because it's the clarity that I wish I had like through the process.
Hmm.
Um, but yes, like as the questions were coming in, it just kind of gave me the chance to really grow this tight knit community of students that were ambitious, maybe even came from a similar background. Maybe we're also first gen or low income and just finally had like a resource that they could rely on
Hmm.
to like achieve these really ambitious goals.
Were you trying to figure out how to like balance your time here between like this new interesting thing that was happening that was like not part of your academic journey and then all of this other stuff that you had to do to keep your GPA up and maybe get a job in consulting?
Yeah, I would say it came to a point I wasn't even trying to balance it. I was trying to figure out a way to allocate more time to content,
Yeah.
just kind of take away time from academics, if anything, because again, it was I went from just like giving advice straight onto the camera to also like learning editing and learning how to like lighting and learning how to up the production quality, learning how
Hmm.
to tell stories,
Yeah.
and that craft component to it was just like a natural passion of mine that kind of reinvigorated from when I was younger.
Did it start sucking away from times for academics?
It did. It definitely did. But thankfully, my senior year is when I was just taking a lot of like my business courses. So I double majored, and so a lot of like the
Yeah.
easier courses for my curriculum I was then taking. So it wasn't
Yeah.
too bad.
And what a good, also a good time to be taking business courses when you are in effect, maybe not intentionally, but definitely in effect starting a business.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like having that more analytical perspective from MIT uh, was really helpful because like social media is just all analytics. And so
Yes.
I just slowly became obsessed over like the retention graphs and the numbers. And I remember I would like run spreadsheets of the ratios, which sounds crazy, I know, but I think it just I loved both the crafts, but then also like the technical component. I'm like, how do these algorithms work, and how can I, give my message out to as many people as
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah, I mean that obsession is something that I see in in not every YouTube creator or, social media creator, but something I see in a lot of them. Is that's something I have too. When you were about to graduate, did you think I'm going to do Gohar's Guide? Was it called Gohar's Guide by this point?
It was by the end of my
Okay.
senior year. Yep.
Were you thinking this is going to be my job, or were you thinking I need to get recruited?
I was thinking this is going to be my job and I'm going to do anything and everything I can to make this work.
Nice.
Like
Was it paying bills?
so at the time of my graduation, I had done a single brand deal with Quizlet for $1,000. I had earned no ad revenue either, but at the same
So
time, I was
no.
also so no, so it was not paying bills at that time.
Yeah.
But I had heard a lot of stories about just the creator economy and how brand deals just become a huge component of like these creators' livelihoods. And
Yeah.
so I saw the initial sparks and sort of had faith that if I were to, maybe go off TikTok, but then also build up my Instagram and my YouTube platforms and all these other
Hmm.
uh, audiences, that I could turn this into not just like a hobby, but like a media business one
Yeah.
day.
And it's also, I imagine as a student who had just gone through business school, you were like, and this is a market that actually does have plenty of money in it.
This is something I had to explain exactly, almost verbatim to my parents as well. Just to give them like a sense of like how the ecosystem actually works
Yeah.
and how it's
And
not just like
yeah, and
everyone's
a
getting
sense
paid
that
this.
you're taking it seriously. You're not goofing off. You're like starting a thing. You're like doing
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
It's going to have translational skills even if you don't end up doing it forever. So I'm guessing because MIT, you graduated debt free.
Yeah.
That's great. That feels really good. And means that you can maybe take a risk like starting your own business right out of school.
I just feel incredibly grateful with how that panned out and how my parents, uh, not only for me, but for my other two younger brothers, have been able to, they haven't had to take like a financial burden upon themselves to send us all three to
Yeah.
college.
Hmm.
And that has to be, that's just been an immense blessing.
When you were getting into school, when you said like, I'm going to go to MIT, what was the process of like navigating their needs-based aid system?
It was relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
I remember just filling out like the basic financial aid forms, like the FAFSA, the CSS. Uh, and like the CSS is what really these institutions use to figure out uh, like how much private aid you're going to receive.
Hmm.
And so after that, they sent me like this financial aid award letter, kind of stating how much they were going to give me. And the interesting part about these schools is that not only will it sometimes be free to go, but sometimes they will like literally pay you to attend because they have like excess budget for like supplies and books and
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
transportation. And so you just have some extra cash sitting around to also just help fund like the other parts of college.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a thing for many students. The most expensive part of college is lost income. So if you are like living, paying rent, buying food, like all of the expenses don't go away and you don't have time or as much time to work, then you have your all of your expenses. Like you can look at the cost of college, but you also have to like include the cost of being a living human body in the world
Yeah.
that may not be able to like have as many hours of work, or ideally you're not working, you're working just on your education. So if you're at MIT, I would not imagine it would be easy to also be a waiter.
No, and it's like they have on-campus jobs that, some students did balance. I tried
Yeah.
balancing it for a little bit, but it was just not only incredibly difficult, but they just don't pay well. It's like 10 to
Hmm.
13 an hour.
Yeah.
And it's just for like very small, like random jobs.
How'd you celebrate when you got done?
With
Throw your hat in the air, everybody. What did you have a party?
I remember like graduating, coming home, and like thinking to myself, so is this it? Like I remember coming back to my home, like my old like bedroom, because it's really weird. Like you graduate, and in
Yeah.
the moment, like it's really celebratory, like the ceremony. But then it's like that moment when you come back home and realize like you're just now confronted, like standing in front of the real world, and like there's no real path ahead of you.
Yeah.
Um, so it was like simultaneous like celebration, but then also a bit of like intimidation about,
Yeah.
okay, like now my life is in my own hands. And it's really up to me to see where this goes.
I had the same thing. I remember like, you know, the I didn't have my own computer. And so like my computer was like in the living room of my parents' house, and I'm like graduated from college and like going downstairs to use the computer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is way worse.
Yeah.
Like back at home. And I didn't live at home I lived at home for about a year, and I saved up a ton of money, and it like let me do a bunch of stuff. But I like that was, and like socially it was such a bummer, to go from like having all of like these people around to being like no, like all of my friends were far away. Is there stuff you would have done differently if you had it all to do over again?
I think to my freshman year, I would have 100% called my parents more.
Oh,
I I think the
yeah,
transition to college is overwhelming, but also exciting, and it takes you in a bunch of different directions. I remember, transparently in high school, I had a good friend group, but I wasn't like super outgoing. I wasn't going out all the time. I wasn't partying. I wasn't like exploring
sure.
different things.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, you drop me in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There's like a whole city to explore. My parents aren't here. There's a bunch of new friends that I've made. And it's like, I just want to be out and about all the time. And it was just, of course, I was focused on my academics, but it was just so much fun being able to
Yeah.
explore and take in all these new opportunities, that I sort of lost touch with my family for a little bit. They're like, Gohar, you're not calling as much. Like, how are things going?
Hmm.
And I wish I just sort of dialed it down a little bit and sort of stayed closer to them that first semester.
Did you feel like you took the right mix of classes, or do you wish you had taken some time to take like weirder things?
I definitely wish I took weirder things because I took a lot of like just the standard gen ed courses and then my majors, the
Uh-huh.
stuff from my major. But MIT, for example, has a glass blowing course, and that's one course that people like are on literal wait lists for that are just humongous. I had the opportunity to go back and check out this glass blowing course for a video recently, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I wish I took this at some point during school.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just like random stuff like that, just to bring
Uh-huh.
me outside of the major bubble.
Yeah, totally. And it can feel so like you have to stay on the path. So what are you what did you take away from school with you? Like, what are the biggest things you learned there?
I think being able to communicate clearly and honestly. I
Hmm.
remember being part of a small research group my was it junior year. I was working on like a small research project as an extracurricular, and I was responsible for a certain component of that project. Um, like I had to build like this mailing app that could analyze email messages that came in for like sentiment. Um, and I remember I was a bit delayed on the timeline. Like school
Hmm.
was catching up. I didn't have time to work on the project, and I definitely could have been more open about the status of where it was.
Hmm.
And I remember when it came time for the final presentation, how to deliver the work that I had done, um, and it just wasn't where people were expecting it to be. And
Hmm.
I just remember that being like a really pivotal moment for me, that sort of that ache that I felt in my stomach. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like I wish I had sort of communicated this better or just been more open about it. So
Hmm.
that's like one value slash lesson I've taken into the real world and applied to like everything I do today. Um, but I think more broadly, it's just been a lot of it was just about building the systems that work for me. And I know that sounds really wishy-washy and high level, but like figuring out, how I want to spend my days, how I want to build my calendar, how I want to like prioritize like friends versus my work. And I think
Hmm.
it helped me kind of like balance out those values in a way that I still carry today.
So, Gohar, you've got Gohar's Guide. You've also got uh, Next Admit, which is, tell me about Next Admit real quick.
Yeah, so it's a small college admissions business that I founded. Uh, it sort of coincided with when I started social media, but our whole mission there is to just provide affordable counseling services
Hmm.
to like high school students. I
Yeah.
think the industry, like what I often say is that uh, it's like low volume, high price, and you have counseling firms that are charging like thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars for these different like mentorship packages. Uh, our approach, and thankfully because of social media, is to be like high volume, low price, where we can just pair students up with like near peer mentors, we call them, and these are like
Mm.
students at top schools who can guide them through the admissions process. Help them figure out how to write like an essay that tells a cohesive and inspiring story. And so that's been a business that I've been running alongside Gohar's Guide. But thankfully, we have like a team there that handles a lot of the stuff. So a lot of my focus has just been on the media, on the media component.
That's great. And as a person who runs businesses and makes content, it's good. It's really great to be able to focus on the content part, which is really not easy. And it like requires a lot of skill and also you have a lot of embodied stuff in you in the content space that you can't outsource because it's you.
Mhm.
It's like the people's trust for your actual you-ness. And so it's great to be able to do that. So what do you think is next for you?
I see myself building out Gohar's Guide for the next several decades. I think a lot of people, when they talk about the creator life cycle, they refer to
Mhm.
it as being between 4 to 6 years. But I think we're seeing the emergence of creators who are now like making it their livelihood and can do it for like a lifetime almost, because you learn to continue reinventing yourself,
Hmm.
you learn ways to keep the content fresh. And so
It's work, but you can do it.
exactly.
At least I have so far.
Exactly. And so like, one big milestone recently, like, where I'm sitting right now, is like this new studio space. It's transparently like the apartment down the hall from where I am, but
You
we've just
just
turned this.
rented another apartment in your building.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like I have like this filming corner here. One of the bedrooms is a classroom. We just made it like into an entire school. One of the bedrooms is like a dorm room. But like this
That's
is the
awesome.
direction that I want to head in. I just want to build out
Yeah.
like a full media company where I get to pursue projects I'm passionate about and then do it with people who are, similarly passionate about these topics as well.
How how do you keep on learning new stuff?
This might sound really funny, but like literally one of my tasks every day is to just spend like 30 minutes learning something new. Like I will block off time in my calendar, like explicitly to learn. And I know it sounds silly, but I feel like, of course I'm learning through my work and what I'm doing, but it's kind of closing me off until like a certain bubble. Like I'm learning a certain
Wow.
set of skills and,
Yeah.
uh, just facts.
Hmm.
But my goal is, every single day I want to just cover like a random topic, whether it's like the Neolithic era or, I've recently finished a book about like Indonesia. I read about like the Vietnam War recently, and it's like these topics that I just wasn't able to like learn about in
Hmm.
college and even high school. Um, and I think I supplemented a lot with AI, to be honest. Like sometimes what I'll do is as I'm reading a book, I will
Hmm.
have like an AI open, like the voice mode. And so like as I'm reading, I'm like actively reading. And whenever I have questions, I just ask the AI for clarification. And it's like
Wow.
we're having a dialogue as I'm like learning something new. And that's been a really fun but weird dynamic.
Gohar, last question. Do you ever think about doing more education formally?
That thought, that's been a big personal debate. It was back in like 2022, 2023. The thought of getting an MBA,
Yeah.
that I was like, okay, I'm running Gohar's Guide, I'm running this business, an MBA would complement it perfectly. But
Hmm.
like, a few years down the line now, I think I have gotten an MBA just by
Doing
virtue
it?
of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So no, But I think a master's in education could be interesting because I have one friend who's currently doing that, and I think some of these master's programs have like entrepreneurial tracks embedded, and that almost seems like a perfect complement to what I do.
You are a fascinating guy, and I'm really glad to know you. And I thank you very much for coming and sharing your story with us.
It's been my absolute pleasure, Hank. Like, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thanks for watching this episode of College Journeys. Wherever you are in your own education, Study Hall has resources to help you. From our fast guides to college majors to actually signing up for college-level courses through GoStudyHall.com for only $25, we can help you on your path.